everyone, and welcome to Emotional Grit, the podcast where you can learn about the power of perspective and the science that fuels us. I'm your host, Jennifer Fernjack, and I'm happy to say that my guest today is Paul Oliver. We're going to be talking about a neurological condition that's called synesthesia. It's hard to pronounce and it's kind of hard and complex to understand, but it's really fascinating to hear stories and talk about it. So please feel free to go to my YouTube channel called Emotional Grit to like and subscribe to the actual podcast itself and to join our episodes as well. So, Paul, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, from what I've read, synesthesia is something where it's an actual mixing of the senses, or one where if one of your senses gets stimulated, it may trigger another one. Maybe for example, you could feel like you're being touched when somebody else is being touched, and that might seem like it's not a big deal. But what if the other person is actually in pain? That could actually be upsetting. Or it could be people who hear colors or see music, that kind of thing. So, for you, how would you describe some of the symptoms that you have?
Uh, that's a pretty good analysis. My summation is it's like we got the five senses, but sometimes the wires get a little crossed. So for me, the wires for my ears and my eyes are plugged into the same hole. So sometimes I see what I hear, and on very rare occasions, I can look at something and be like, I can hear that picture. That's a little bit more rare, but
That's fascinating. So, what would be an example of being able to see something that you're hearing?
so that's the tricky part. Is it's kind of by the nature of it is a very difficult thing to describe, because what I hear is always in motion, like sound, and the more you start describing, I have to get this out of the way. Me describing what I'm hearing doesn't make sense because it's ultimately an apparition. It's my brain mixing up that what I'm hearing, it thinks it's visual data. So it's presenting what I'm hearing as visual data, but it's all just artificial fragments at the end of the day. So it's like a teaspoon of imagination, but it's definitely something that's there that I'm perceiving.
Oh,
Um, The
s-
one I like to explain to people and why it's just so hard to really explain is drums, like a simple tap on a drum, sounds the way a balloon looks the moment it's popping. You kind of know what a balloon looks like when it's popping, but it's such a brief 300ths of a second that you can't really ever look at it square on or describe it at all.
that is really interesting. Like, were you born with this, or did it kind of like develop over time, or when did you first notice that these kinds of things were happening?
Well, I was born with it. I had it my whole life, and it was really obnoxious when I was a kid and caused me a lot of problems because I didn't quite understand it. And no one ever talked about it, and I didn't talk about it because I figured it was just a matter of fact part of being alive. Um, it's just I would use a few extra adjectives to describe music and noises, like, "Oh, that fire truck sounds red," or "Oh, though that violin sounds purple," or something like that. And people would just brush it off as he's being weird and accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it wasn't until I was actually in a college class of some sort that the topic of synesthesia got brought up, and it was like a psychology 100 or some kind of class like that, very entry level thing. I was just like, I think I have that, and then we started talking about it after class, and I matched all the symptoms. I did a little bit more research in my spare time, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I talked to my dad about it, and he had it. And I talked to my sister about it, and she had it. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I just have this now.
Wow. Well, as part of my research for the episode tonight, I wanted to know if there were any famous people who have synesthesia. And I read that the artist Vincent Van Gogh, who of course was known for his art and to this day is known for his art, but when he was growing up, he took piano lessons. And his piano teacher noticed that he was associating certain colors with different notes. And of course, this was a long time ago. And she thought that something was like wrong with him. And so she kicked him out of class. So I mean, that's just kind of interesting how obviously people back then didn't know what they didn't know. But yeah, he associated different colors with different notes. And then I've also read about how the singer Billy Joel has synesthesia, and how when he's working with music, he can tell rhythms from melodies based on what he's envisioning and actually things he's seeing with color when he hears the music and actually plays it. So really cool stuff. But have you heard of other, whether it's actors or athletes or any public figures that have it as well?
I don't really keep track of other public figures like that, so nobody really comes to mind as far as famous people. But I've met enough people to know that it is not like common, but it's semi rare. Um, I've read some stuff online that it's something like 0.5% to 3% of any given population has it to some varying degree. Some people have it a bit stronger than others, and some people have it in different ways that you'd never notice. Like my sister, for example, she has it smell to sight. So she smells something and she sees a corresponding color or something to that effect.
Huh.
Um,
So
she
so
was just
if she sees a color, is it that the lens through which she's viewing things in a room, like whether it's people or the room itself or whatever, is all now under a shade of red, or is it just like a blurb of red kind of a thing?
That's kind of the impression I would get, but I don't even pretend to ask her all those nuanced questions because I would be scared of having to, on the other hand, have to explain what a violin looks like or anything like that. Um, because it's one of those things like everyone wants to ask the first question that comes to your mind, what does X, Y, or Z sound like? And it seems like a really simple question. But then I have to stop and think about, okay, what does that look like? Okay, now how can I explain this thing that's a concept to someone using analogies that does you know the way a ribbon looks behind a gymnast
Yeah.
while they're doing their thing? That plus radio, like glow in the darky kind of effects that change and move with color with the trail of the ribbon and shadow up and down, forward and back. That's what like a good bow strung string instrument sounds like to me. And so you're following that ribbon go all over the place, and who knows what it looks like in any given millisecond.
It is so interesting how the brain works. I know a number of years ago, I met someone with a traumatic brain injury, and she, in the years after her, we call it a TBI or a traumatic brain injury, her brain couldn't process music. And so it was a problem because she wanted to relax with music or celebrate with music or whatever on a given day, and she just couldn't. All of a sudden one day she's watching TV and there's this Heinz ketchup commercial that's playing. And as a single bottle of ketchup has the ketchup coming out of it, a single saxophone was playing and she could hear it and she knew what it was. And all of a sudden her eyes filled with tears because she's like, my brain, I can actually understand the music. I get it what the saxophone is doing. And it turns out that with her condition, her brain can't process a guitar on top of the keyboards, on top of the bass, on top of the drums or whatever. It just can't process it. So now she just listens to music where it's a single instrument and then she's fine. I mean,
Mm.
that's fascinating. I know for me personally, I'm what's called a super taster. So as my friends and family can attest to, ever since I was little, I'm really weird when it comes to food. And so I guess my mom and grandma tell stories about how when I was little, sitting in my high chair, I would literally separate like what food I was going to eat and what I didn't want to eat, and they just couldn't figure out why because it was all bland food, you know. But then I noticed when I was in college one time, I was out at this place dancing. It was like a bar, and I had asked the bartender for a Coke, and so he hands me my glass. And when I took a sip off the straw, I thought, I bet he touched a lemon first. Sure enough, I like yelled over the crowd, "Did you touch a lemon first?" or whatever. And the bartender's look was just like, "What?" My taste buds are so sensitive. I could tell that he touched a garnishment to put in somebody else's drink to then touch my straw. I could totally tell. And years later, I was at a restaurant with a friend of mine, and we were waiting for somebody else to join us. And as we were sitting there, we had placed our drink order, which mine again was a Coke. And the server comes over with my glass, and I took a sip of it. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I think this is Diet Coke." And he goes, "Oh, sorry." So he leaves and then comes back. I then took a sip of it, and I said, I'm sorry. It still tastes like Diet Coke. And the jaw on this server just dropped. And he goes, "You've got to be kidding me." And then he starts laughing. He goes, "I am so busted." Turns out he had taken the glass that I had earlier that had the Diet Coke in it. He had emptied it out and then put the regular Coke in it. Well, my taste buds are so sensitive, I could taste the Diet Coke residue in the glass that's now filled with regular Coke. But my taste buds are insane. So the crazy thing about this is that my super taster tendencies, I'm not sure if it's maybe I have too many taste buds or what. I don't know. But I had surgery for a brain tumor back in 2016, and then I got radiation treatments on my head as well. Even though it wasn't cancerous, but it was with the thought of killing the cells that couldn't be removed during the surgery. And I don't know if it was the anesthesia or the radiation later or whatever it was, but now my taste buds are even worse. So it's just interesting how the mind can play games on you, and that signaling between me, it's taste and how it's processed is messed up. And then on top of that, I know that this was, oh gosh, a few years ago now, but it was after the radiation and all that. At my grandma's house, she offered me a cookie that tastes like anise. So it's supposed to taste like black licorice. And so I take a bite of it and I'm eating it and I'm not saying anything. And my grandma knows again that I'm weird with food. So she goes, "Okay, Jen." She's like, "What's up with the cookie?" And I'm like, "Grandma, I kid you not. This cookie tastes like the scent of spaghetti sauce." And she goes, "Okay, whatever." But I swear it tasted like the scent of spaghetti sauce. So it's like the wrong food, but it's my brain. It's like something's just off with how the signals go. And then the other thing, and then I promise I'll be quiet. But the other thing, kind of in tandem with that, is now when I have dental procedures done, the dentist can give me a bunch of Novocaine to do a crown or do a filling or whatever it is they're going to do. And at least 3 times, if not 4, during a given procedure, I'll like raise my hand and I'll be shaking because I'll feel the drill. The Novocaine wears off. It's like the signaling between the nerve and the brain. It's something's just off. So I'm wondering for you, are there things in everyday life that you've noticed are different as well, as far as like have you had to like to adjust how you do things? Like for me, I eat salsa that's not as spicy as everybody else's. But for you, have you had to kind of like change things, the way that you do things as well?
Oh yeah, I don't do sports bars for one. Big cacophonies, especially in small places where the sound is bouncing off the one wall into the next and then back again. I can see that reverberation, and it's like it's seeing. It's to a point where I don't notice it. It's my standard ambient affair. But there are certain acoustic environments that very much just change the sound profile or the volume of a room. Um, and some of those are just more unbearable than others. And especially when there's like a crowd, so many people that the ambient chattering is just creating a murmur. That's its own kind of static because it's all a bunch of different noises coming from different sources going in different directions. So there's just a little bit of a cloud of random fog as you're going around. Um, as I've grown up, I've gotten much, much better at just like tuning it out and ignoring it and focusing. Um, but there's when I was a kid, it was a big deal because I was really picky about sounds and places I go to because my parents were a big fan of live music and I kind of wasn't. So I got into a lot of trouble by sneaking off into like the outskirts of venues a lot of the time and narrowly avoiding getting in trouble. Um,
That's funny.
I hung out in the back porch of a lot of parties. I never really hung out in the party. Um, when I was a little kid, I remember my mom telling me I would have electric blue headaches where I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. And I remember them like the nearest example I could describe people is I just had migraine headaches when I was a kid. but the migraine itself, the pulsing of the brain and that kind of head pressure, the whole world was electric blue and just pulsing. And
Oh,
I don't know if that was, it wasn't something I was hearing because I did the thing you're supposed to do in migraines, shove your head under a pillow, turn the lights off, numb all the senses. But it still kept going. So
huh.
um,
So given the fact that other people in your family also have synesthesia, I can't even pronounce it now, synesthesia. um, are there certain like homemade remedies where it's, hey, if you take a pinch of salt and mix it with some applesauce, it'll subside, or like something like that people wouldn't make up, but it's through experience you learn.
no, there's not really anything medically or pharmaceutical adjacent to synesthesia, except for the fact that it makes pot a little bit more fun when you're listening to music. Um, Everyone who's ever gone to college has, or should have anyway, or let me rephrase that. Anyone who's a big music aficionado has at some point put on a pair of good headphones and a blindfold and just zoned out listening to an album and experienced it on another level. Um, Synesthesia is, there's a visual component to that, so it's kind of like you're watching like a Windows screensaver tied to the music, um, and it's kind of a good time, and pot helps. To my understanding, the only way a non-synesthete can experience synesthesia in whatever sense is through marijuana, among other things. Um, I wouldn't know. I
Yeah.
have synesthesia.
So I do know that there are some positive impacts of the condition. So one of them that I read about is some people have enhanced memory when it comes to different things. So for example, it could be that maybe it's easier, excuse me, to remember somebody's phone number because you could envision the different colors of the digits. So it's easier to remember. Have you noticed whether it's in your personal life or professionally, if there are added benefits like to that effect as far as helping with memory and that kind of thing?
Oh, 100%. Everything in my life is color coded. Uh, and there's a part of that. I don't have the alphanumeric um, synesthesia, which I think is frankly the strangest kind of synesthesia, but it makes sense considering how we were evolved to understand letters as characters. Anyway, I don't have that one, but like sounds, I can memorize what the shape looks like. So cardinals look the same way a fire alarm with a dead 9 volt sounds. Like
Really?
it's the same shape and color and noise and everything. It's just if it's coming from trees, it's cardinals. If it's coming from a building, it's a fire alarm.
That is fascinating. So so let me ask you this. Now this might seem kind of crazy, but that's a fair question. Do you ever categorize like for example, different people by like the same like shade of red? Or for example, maybe anybody you've ever dated shows up red. or like are there any themes like that, or anybody who was a former classmate might look orange or yellow, or like certain connotations or associations with something might affect the hue or the color?
People generally do have colors associated with their voices insofar as their voice is consistent. So, most people have multiple different vocal ranges. Some people get angry and they sound like this. Some people get all giggly and they start sounding like this, and somewhere in between that, there's a common pattern of colors and shapes that I get used to when I'm talking to a person. Um, and eventually I can just memorize those colors and those shapes and just start associating them with that person. Um, the
That's
weird
interesting.
thing is most male pattern voices tend to be somewhere between yellow and very dark brown, almost black. Um, and female pattern voices tend to be anywhere from red through violet into indigo, down to purple and blue.
Huh. Which makes you wonder, for boys who are not quite into puberty yet, when all of a sudden their voice then gets lower, I wonder if that would make a difference. If you met someone when they were like,
Sometimes prepubescent boys sound a little teal or light green.
that's,
I can still tell the difference though.
that is so interesting. And then, does it make a difference if you're listening to, say, like rap music versus somebody singing? Like, does the sound of the voice make a difference in how you perceive the song, or is it more the
Yeah.
instruments that make the difference?
Well, the voice is an instrument as far as I'm concerned. It's just how you say the syllable is how you play the note. So the way the note is played determines the shape. Uh, so for example, ta 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 is a bunch of, I'm just going to simplify them to rectangles with various lengths of a trailing tail based on the length of the ta 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 ta.
Mhm.
But if I said something like a ta, that's like a snake that goes up and then comes down and then goes out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm also wondering, what if somebody had this condition, but they were also colorblind? Is that even a
Yeah,
thing?
I've thought about that a lot. There's a sea creature called the mantis shrimp, which has really trippy color patterns. And if you do a nice Wikipedia level research on it, you'll figure out that it's got a whole bunch of extra cones and rods in its eyes, which, long story short, means it can see more primary, secondary, and tertiary colors than we have the ability to by a factor of like 3 or something. So it can see another 27 colors that our brains simply aren't equipped to even conceive of. And a lot of the time, it feels like I'm approaching that realm where I'm looking at something and I'm like, what color even is that?
That
Like,
is
looking at the
interesting.
color of a peacock's tail square on.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I know that when I've made PowerPoint slides at work over the years, I've been told not to put letters either in a green or a red font because of the fact that people who are colorblind have a harder time with those colors. So I was just thinking, I thought, I wonder if there are certain color font that would affect someone who has synesthesia. If you're watching or looking at a PowerPoint presentation, say the slides are in a blue shade versus an orange or whatever. It can make a difference in how you read the slide.
Yeah. Um, well, insofar as that goes, I would just say bolder is better. Bolder is always better. The
Yeah,
easier, the less effort the eye has to do to figure out what those lines are and how they're supposed to connect, the better.
I can
Um,
see that.
I've met people in college who had letter number synesthesia, where they would associate various numbers and letters as colors and stuff. Um, that one always kind of eluded me because, well, I was just never very good at reading to begin with. Um, but I just imagine that would make most books look like a big jumble of colors, like like an impressionist painting in a lot of ways. Um,
It's
but I
so
don't know,
interesting.
really, because listening to things was such an interesting experience for me. I didn't really ever care to read very much. So I just that might be, looking back on it. A lot of everything I learned was from listening to people and listening to things. And I didn't read very much, and I think I can definitely blame that on the synesthesia.
Oh, I could see that. So, was there anything you noticed at home that maybe your dad or sister didn't do, and you kind of wondered why, but you didn't? But then it all made sense once you started to learn that they have the synesthesia.
Yeah, my sister would get very angry at the smell of anything cooking, to the point that she had to be removed from that floor of the house, because she was very sensitive to smell.
Wow. So
Um,
to her, did it like burn her nose or something, or was it just like it was just like an energy kind of just too much to
you know,
your?
we never figured it out until she was an adult who had moved out. But it was just a piece of the. It was a few dots that we put together a little late after the fact, and was just like, she's really sensitive to smells. We know that she's got synesthesia. It's about smells. Oh, so when she would get really grumpy and start fits for no apparent reason, maybe it was just a smelly place. And we just didn't notice something. She noticing.
I've had friends of mine say that when they were pregnant, that they had a heightened sense of smell or different kinds of things happened. I also know that for me, when I was in the hospital after my brain tumor surgery, even a phone ringing was just too loud for me. And thankfully, after a while, I, kind of came back to my sense of normal and that kind of thing. But even having just a phone in the room and having it ring, I was just like, turn it off, turn it off. And then having any kind of light coming into the room was too much for me to take in as well. So it was literally only a little bit of light that came in from the outside hallway that kind of lit up the room a little bit, but the shade was down on the window. I am laying there almost in the dark, because I just couldn't handle it. And I know other people who now they have a traumatic brain injury. I do not, but for those people where they'll wear like sunglasses in Target, like in the middle of the winter, and being here in Minnesota, people wonder like, well, why are you wearing sunglasses in January or whatever? And really, it's because the fluorescent lights in the store are just too much for them to take on. So I've learned through these podcast episodes and through my book that I wrote and just research and stuff, just cut people some slack. Assume that whatever it is, even if you don't understand it, that's okay. There's probably a reason whatever is happening, or if something's not happening, but you think it should be, cut them some slack. There's probably just something going on and that's one thing too that a lot of people I've met who have traumatic brain injuries will talk about, where they almost wish sometimes that they had some kind of a cane or a crutch or a cast, like something tangible, so people would know to cut them some slack. But they don't have any of those, so you can't tell by looking at them that anything's wrong. And when you think about like movies or TV shows, if someone has either like a tumor or some kind of a traumatic brain injury or whatever it is, in the as far as Hollywood is concerned, the person will have like a bunch of gauze bandages wrapped around their head, so you can tell something's wrong. Well, that's not day-to-day life for most people, so you just don't know. But crazy stuff. And I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was making a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it's like you were saying, in a lot of ways, it is kind of a blessing and a curse. Because everyone I've known who's synesthetic or I don't even the plural of synesthesia, um, they're very sensitive about the thing that they can sense extra of.
Mhm.
But they're also very snobbish and very specific about it. Like I don't think it's any mistake at all that most synesthesia type people end up leaning towards the arts or have some sort of creative impulse, because in so many ways we get to see the world in a very different lens than most people and not realize it, but also not notice it. um and so I think there's some kind of will to express that in so many ways. uh that's why I'm personally a really big fan of color and um, sound, and that's why I like exploring music. And anybody who I ever drive with, I'm always like, "Hey, man, let me put this on for you. It's heavy metal gospel," and,
That's awesome.
and I just want to like share these things with people, and I'll be like, "This looks like a roller coaster through a cotton candy submarine," and they'll be like, "Oh, best play."
And the person who's driving is like, great, all right. Whereas I think it's fascinating because you're not making it up, any more than I'm trying to make up the fact that I'm a super taster. I'm sure that most people who I go out to dinner with are probably like, okay, Jen, where's the kids menu? And sometimes I do order off the kids menu, but I'm not doing it on purpose. So it's just kind of how we're wired, or it's just kind of some crazy stuff. But do you know, are there any kind of like resources out there for people who maybe aren't sure if they have this, but want to learn a little bit more about it, like certain organizations you can think of, or um,
I can't think of any. I stumbled into my diagnosis completely by happenstance, and have kind of just been rolling with it ever since. Uh, Couldn't tell you.
How did
It's not
you
debilitating.
how did you stumble into it?
I was at a so I found out about it. I did some I listened to it ambiently on a podcast and thought, huh, that's interesting in high school, and then proceeded to continue to live out my adolescence. And then I got to college and it got brought up again in some very early 100 level psychology class of some sort. Um, and I just decided to, professor was talking about it. I raised my hand. I was like, I think I got that. He asked me a few questions. I answered them. I had basically this conversation in front of the class and realized it was really awkward and difficult to try to explain what it looks like. And then I saw the professor after class. He asked me a few more questions and was like, "Yeah, you probably definitely got this. Ask your family if they got it because it's usually genetic." Um, and it turns out that yeah, no, my family has it, and my family has it pretty dang deep. So I'm very convinced at this point that there is some genetic component. Um, and I come from a family of artists and architects and people who like to make things line up into little squares and be mathematically accurate and even with one another. Um, so I think that might be tied to it in some way. I can't quite describe. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's not debilitating. It just makes some noise. It's, everyone's picky about something. It's just what we're predisposed to being picky about.
Yeah. I wonder if there are studies out there that show people are more apt to have synesthesia if they live in a certain part of the country. Like, for example, I read yesterday online that there are higher rates of Parkinson's disease of people who live by golf courses. And I have not verified the source where I read it. I just kind of came across it online. And the theory is that it might be caused in part by pesticides because of the fairway and whatever. So sometimes, and like for me, I grew up in northern Minnesota, kind of like about 20 minutes away from Lake Superior. Very, very cold climate. And it's my understanding from what people say that the county that I grew up in has high rates of MS. Now, I've not verified that, but that's what I've been told. And one of the theories is that it's possibly triggered by a lack of vitamin D because we're indoors all the time because in the winter it's cold. And in the summer, we don't like it super hot. So, you just, unless you're going to the beach or going golfing, I guess, you kind of avoid it. So the theory is that it might be caused from a lack of vitamin D. But I'm wondering with synesthesia, if there are stats like that as well that show that someone's more apt to have it if they live by whatever, or if they, I don't know. I guess I'd have to research it, but
I wouldn't know anything about that. Everyone I've ever met who's had it has had it since birth. I don't think I've ever met anyone who had it after the fact, except for a few stoners in college who had it on for a weekend one time that they can't tell the cops about.
right,
Uh,
right.
Beyond that, I really do think it's a kind of you got it or you don't.
Right,
And
right.
it is kind of a curse in a way because there's just certain places and things that are off limits. Like every day, leaf blowers. I have a job where I go to various neighborhoods for installing projects, so I'm always in unfamiliar territory. And a lot of the time, I'm in places with gardens that are manicured by lawns crews, and I'm just hanging in an unfamiliar parking lot. And I cannot stand the sound of gasoline engine lawn care tools. Oh, it is awful. It's like a
Really?
screen of static just radiating and buzzing like a pack of angry hornets wherever that guy's going, and it follows. You go into your car, you shut the door, you roll the windows up. It's still just right outside the car. Oh, it's terrible.
That's interesting. Well, for me, what's a big deal is fingers on a chalkboard
Yeah,
like that.
honestly, that doesn't bother me so much.
That's okay. But yeah, so do you find that if you want to go to a stadium event, like for like some kind of a NFL game or whatever,
Oh, I just don't do that.
I was gonna say, is it even an option? Or
That would be a bad time. You know what? You give me some free tickets I want off the radio, and you get a cute girl to convince me to go. I might even show up and hang out there for 10 minutes, get past the ticket booth, start sweating, panic, and run the hell away. That's how that works.
Wow. And of course, a stadium event has lots of stimulus or stimuli. I get that, but a friend of mine said that at his office that there's one guy that he sits by who freaks out if someone clicks their pen. Like it's like to him, it's like fingers on a chalkboard. Like so it's just too much. So yeah, so he can't be around people who are clicking. You know, S- very
One
very
thing that reminds me of is I at a very young age made it a big point to learn how to move throughout the world very silently. And I think a big part of that was I could see the sound my footsteps made. And I distinctly remember trying to sneak around the house when I was a little kid, trying not to wake up the parents. Like I could see the noise going into their room. And so I had to be very, very soft footed.
that's
And
that's
now I'll
fascinating.
around the world, and because I'm very sensitive to every little noise and I'm not thinking about it, I just assume everyone is just as sensitive as I am. So I just naturally walk very quietly because I'm not trying to disturb the peace,
Wow.
the audio level of the room is. I never want to be loud.
Right. That is really cool. Wow. So what you're saying then is that it would be super convenient if I was around wearing my 2.5 inch heels walking on tile. Is that what you're saying? You
Oh, I
probably
would
hate it.
where you were. It would be like a radar ping every time you took a step.
Wow. That is interesting. So you said that you could hear the sound. How did it work again? Was it with your footsteps? Was it hearing this?
See the sound bouncing around the walls of the house. So all right, let's say we had a balloon, all right, and we filled the balloon with really brightly colored gas, right? Like it's bright holographic green gas. And each footstep, that balloon is popping and that gas is spreading throughout the room, but lightning quick, and it's bouncing off every wall. And I can see, if it's a perfectly quiet room, I can see the general direction the noise is taking before it fades into just air, nothing. And so I can kind of like, it's weird. I feel like I make a pretty good hunter because I can see where the sound is coming from.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story because there may be people out there who might watch this episode and think, "Oh, you know what? I've always wondered why XYZ happens, or what's the name for this?" Or just kind of, I think it'd be very easily to feel kind of isolated because it's hard to talk about sometimes with people. And so, by being able to watch this episode and learn that, hey, you know what? Yes, there's a name for it. Yes, there are other people who are out there who are experiencing it as well, and that yeah, I don't know, and then you people like me who think it's really really interesting. So I just appreciate you sharing your story. But before we close things out, is there an organization that you know of that people could um Google, or is it more you just kind of like learn a lot from your family that
I learned a lot from my family. I would say the first biggest step is figuring out how it's spelled. Because first, once you know that there's a word for it, you can start putting the dots together of, oh, maybe it's not normal for me to taste sounds. You never stopped and thought about it. Everyone who's got this has gone through most of their life just thinking it was normal because it has
yeah.
been the. And so just realizing that A, it's a thing that can even be a thing. Like no one told you that seeing things was a thing. It was. So knowing that there's a word for it and then learning how that word is spelled is honestly the hardest part because you can't sound it out. It's a really tricky word. Curse
It's
the
true.
Latin. Um,
It's like 4 or 5 syllables long. So I tried to learn it, memorize it before the call today, and I thought maybe I'll just pronounce it and go like this. I'll just cover my mouth when I'm saying it. But yeah, I think it's synesthesia, but
well,
that
that's
that's
the
what I'm.
word. It's so long and hardly ever used that you can pronounce it any gosh dang way you want. You're right. No one's going to call you on it.
Right, right, right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that you want to close out as far as sharing, or are you good to go, or anything you want to call out?
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Cool. All right. And to those of you who are listening and watching, thank you very kindly. As I mentioned earlier, please feel free to go to YouTube, to my YouTube channel called Emotional Grit, to like and subscribe to the podcast and watch other episodes as well. So thanks, Paul, and thanks, everyone.